Fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime in Fuego, and if it please you join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That's right, I am Fuego for short, and welcome to the horror show where I do this show every terrifying Tuesday, every scarific Saturday, at least for now. After episode 150, when we begin the 6th season of the horror show, there is debate, as I have said a few times before, about turning this into a once-a-week show once again. But at least for now, yeah, you still have me twice a week, so deal with it. And so earlier this week, on the 12th of March, I was going to do a 15-year anniversary for a certain film. However, we had some major news drop that day about, well, one of the main peeps behind The Handmaid's Tale finally adapting The Talisman for the big screen for Steven Spielberg's Amblin Entertainment. And so I had an episode that I was all set to film that day, and lo and behold, I was like, well, I guess duty calls, and I gotta talk about The Talisman, my love of it, my mixed feelings about Black House, the sequel, my hope for, you know, Peter Straub and Stevie K to eventually, you know, figure it out and get that 3rd volume done about Jack Sawyer, you know, being in, you know, back over in the territories, and maybe some DT crossover and so on. But so now we are getting proper to the 15-year anniversary that we just celebrated, because here on Hail to Stephen King, we do anniversaries of both books and films. And 15 years ago, on the 12th, this past week, yes, Secret Window, based on the novella from Stevie K's 2nd attempt at doing just a little 4-volume thing. So originally he had done different seasons, and then in 1990, in September, he released 4 Past Midnight, which had The Langoliers, and Secret Window, Secret Garden, which is what, you know, this is based on, obviously. And then he also had, excuse me, the other 2 which had not been adapted. You know, Langoliers was a mini-series, and Secret Window being this particular film, but The Library Policeman and The Sundog being the 2 that have yet to be adapted, regrettably, unfortunately. But so, yeah, I must say, I feel like this is a film that has really been lost in the shuffle as the years have gone on. And ironically, in all of the promotional materials that I was looking at as I was taking a peek back, I just rewatched this film this past week. I did not reread the the novella, because it's far longer than a short story. It's over 100 pages, like 120 and some change if I remember correctly. But yeah, it was not heavily marketed at the time as a Stephen King adaptation. It was more so kind of trying to find its own identity and, you know, do its own thing, and really banking on the star power of Johnny Depp at the time, obviously. I think he had just done the first Pirates, and so, whereas, you know, I had loved him for, you know, boy, like 2 decades at this point. Everything from, you know, Crybaby to and all the Burton stuff, you know, Scissorhands and you know, Sleepy Hollow and vice versa. I mean, I love the hell out of some Johnny D. Unfortunately, he's had himself in some shizzle as of late, and really hasn't had like a knockout, drag-out, amazing performance in quite a while. But, you know, hey, it is what it is. I still believe the guy to be extremely talented, and you know, we'll just let his tome of work speak for itself, even if recently with all the Amber Heard stuff and whatever, it's kind of nasty and stupid to hear about. Not even so much nasty, he's just kind of a bastardo lately, you know, despite his immense amounts of creativity and whatnot. But, so they banked more so on the Johnny Depp star power, as opposed to trying to let everybody know that this was a Stephen King adaptation, because Sai King stuff was, in my estimation at least, in the early 2000s when this came out, 2004 to be approximate, March 2004, King was not in vogue like he was in, you know, pretty much the entirety of the 80s and a good chunk of the early 90s. I've said countless times that aside from the constant readers, King had really lost some of his mainstream steam about this time. And so I think that's why it doesn't say based on a short story by Stephen King and, you know, all like the front cover like you see in so many of these other things and whatnot. But I think this is insanely underrated. I think that it boasts a terrific cast, which includes smaller roles by a few, you know, like, you know, Timothy Hutton, I believe is the guy's name. I just want to double check. Yes, he was also in The Dark Half, obviously. Charles S. Dutton, I always don't know how to properly pronounce that, but yeah, I just watched him in Mimic recently, and he's the Alien 3. I mean, dude is badass actor, and he was in, you know, tons of different roles. Also a smaller part in this, and then you've got Maria Bello, you know, if I'm not mistaken, a pre-History of Violence Maria Bello, you know, and she went on to star in Big Driver for Lifetime, and that was an adaptation of the third time that King did the 4-novella thing with the Full Dark No Stars, wherever that is. Oh, that's right, that is on the very bottom shelf, along with all the Cemetery Dance stuff. But, so, you have people with a prior Stephen King, you know, kind of connection in Maria and Timothy, and then you've also got a terrific performance by John Turturro, and then obviously I mentioned Johnny Depp. And so, just to give a little bit of basis on this, I'm not here to compare my recollections of the novella, since I did not reread it to this, but there are a few specific differences that I recall very distinctly, most notably the ending. And it's really funny, the discussion about the ending in this, because in the film, which is what I rewatched this past week, a point of contention, and I'm pretty sure it was in the novella, but they really put it as a point of emphasis in the film, is the changing of the ending as far as this accusation with this writer goes. So just to bring you all up to speed if you're not that familiar with this, and I'm not going to super spoil or anything, but so you have this guy, Mort Rainey, and Mort Rainey has gone through a recent divorce with his wife, or in the film, I think he was divorced in the book if I remember, and he's like in the process of it in the movie, because he is in the process of it in the movie, and you know, he won't sign the papers, and he's, you know, he's in an aspect of denial and whatnot. But so yeah, he said him and his wife no longer together, obviously, and so he is almost in exile. I know this takes place in northern New York, but it's definitely Maine in the book if I remember correctly. And so, you know, she's taken over the house and is living with some new dude, Tom or Tim or something like that. Anyway, not really crucial information, because so she is living in their old house and he is in their like vacation property up north in New England, you know, at least north of, you know, the city where he conducts a lot of his business. And of course, this is another Sai King story where we have a writer, and at one point in his career, he was accused of plagiarism, and this is the second time that this is coming to fruition, and yet a much nastier manner. But we don't really get, at least in the movie, you know, a lot of information about it. It's way more so in the book, and that's something that I distinctively remember, is that, and they hint at it in this, that Mort Rainey had a previous accusation, settled it out of court. They talk about it here and there in a few different scenes, and so this is the second time this sort of thing has happened. And I guess initially, you know, that one when he was younger, he admitted, he figured it out, settled it out of court, whatever, but this one he vehemently denies when this guy shows up at the very beginning of the film. Well, it's the very beginning of the story, if I remember correctly, but it's not the very beginning of the film. He confronts his ex and the new man that she's with at the very beginning of this movie, but you know, it's just a couple minutes, and then it goes right into the beginning of the book proper, with him just answering the door of his little spot by the lake in northern, you know, wherever, whether it's, you know, northern New York or, you know, Maine or whatever. The guy's like, "You stole my story." Played splendidly by John Turturro. And of course you have the standoffishness by Johnny D, and he's like, "I don't know what you're talking about, and you know, if you are making accusations of plagiarism, consult my lawyer," so on and so forth. And it really boils down to this John Turturro character, John Shooter. So there's so many Johns in this, it's crazy. There's so many Johns. See John's John, bad John. And this guy is indeed a bad John. and he is accusing Mort of having stolen his story, Secret Window, and then turned it into his own, you know, just essentially rewriting it. And it was originally entitled Sowing Season, and this is all, once again, I haven't cross-referenced, I actually have not read this novella in, boy, it's been a long time. I don't think I've reread this novella since I initially finished up with my, like, Walking Down the Path of the Beam. And it's weird because of the fact that the stories that I've actually come back to and reread are the ones that haven't been adapted. As I mentioned earlier in the video, Library Policeman and The Sundog, I've reread both of those because of the fact that they have not been adapted into anything. Whereas since both of these have, with really not a massive amount of differences for the first two novellas, The Langoliers and this one. I mean, granted, there's nuances, you know. I talked about there is an ending difference here, but we'll get to that, you know, further on. And then there's some little minute changes here and there, but really they're fairly faithful adaptations, being The Langoliers and being this one for Secret Window, Secret Garden. But yeah, I'm not here to cross-reference, as I mentioned, and so yeah, I always think Sowing Season because of the fact that Brand New, one of my absolute favorite bands, used that as kind of a launching point and also as a title for one of their songs on The Devil and God Are Raging Inside Me. And it's a terrific album, and it's got some very awesome songs. And yes, that is me wearing my former emo badge on my sleeve saying I love Brand New and Jesse Lacey and those cats from, I think they're from New Jersey if I'm not mistaken. Anyway, so accusations are made, and dude basically says, Shooter tells Mort, he's like, I'm gonna come back and we're gonna settle this out. The worst thing that you did to me when you stole my story was changing my ending. Fix the ending. The ending is the most important part. And in this movie, the changing of the ending becomes such a meta thing for the sheer fact that the movie changes the ending from the book. And I feel like that's actually one of the things that some people talk smack, including Ebert and Roper, you know, rest peacefully. Well, at this point, both Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert. I was referring initially to Siskel because when they brought in Richard Roper, it just never felt quite the same for me. But yeah, Ebert and Roper gave it 2 thumbs up, although Roger Ebert in his printed review, and I'm not sure if he mentioned it on the actual TV show or not, but he was like, yeah, the ending is what I just wasn't so hot on. The ending for me, and the fact that they changed it and had the ballsiness to change it, and subverting the expectation aspect of somebody who was familiar with the source material, it's really in a lot of ways the same thing that they did with The Mist. It's the same thing that they seem to be kind of doing to, and not with the ending obviously, but with the upcoming Pet Sematary. So it's, I'm honestly, I'm always all for, at this point now, wasn't before, but at this point now, I'm always for the different twinny-verse, you know, different level of the tower, whatever version of a Sai King story when it is put to film. Because of the fact that if you just know everything that's going to happen beat for beat, that's not really very exciting, you know? And some may disagree with me, and you are more than welcome to. That is the reason why art of any kind is subjective, whether it's a painting, whether it's a book, whether it's a, you know, miniseries on television, whether it's a film, whatever it may be. But I actually, at this point, I'm less about the faithful adaptations. Faithful to a degree, but at least throw some twists at me, throw some curveballs at me, keep it interesting as opposed to buy the books. Because if it was just buy the books, I'd read the goddamn book, you know? So, the ending. The ending is different, and that is without me spoiling anything, but the ending is different, and it's just very funny how they put such a point of emphasis on that, and for anybody who read the book and thought the ending was going one way, they give you the impression that it's going that way. And that's not to say it's a drastic departure. It may be, it may not be, who knows, but it's just not quite what the audience might expect. But, you know, if I'm going to continue along with proper horror show performances without really, you know, divulging too much more about the story, because really, it's about Mort Rainey and this guy confronting him, and then Mort goes and consults people to assist him. In the book, if I remember, it's a caretaker that he goes and, you know, has tried to validate some information and investigate things. And in the movie, it's you know, Charles S. Dutton playing this private investigator buddy of his. who goes and starts kind of peeking around and whatnot. The caretaker is a woman in this, and there's also you know, just minor differences, like he has a cat in the book and he has a pet dog in this one, but really so much of it is very faithfully adapted, and yeah, that's where I don't want to spoil anything here, because I really would like you to approach this, if you haven't seen it, and especially if you haven't read it, just with you know, clear head, free mind, and all that stuff, without any aspect of, you know, prior reservations or judgmental mentality or whatever it may be, because I really, really enjoy the hell out of this movie. And the screenplay was adapted by David Koepp, I believe his name is, and yeah, he also directed this. So, interesting thing about David Koepp is that he has an insane IMDb. It's really ridiculous between the movies he's directed and the movies he's scripted. However, most of the stuff that he has scripted is stuff that he's either co-scripted with other people or adaptations of novels and things like that, like obviously adaptation of a novella in this case, but he also scripted Jurassic Park and The Lost World Jurassic Park. He, you know, in some cases he did write really interesting original scripts. Carlito's Way, I really enjoyed. He wrote the original script for Story of Echoes and directed that with Kevin Bacon. That was a pretty good ghost story. But he also has stuff on his track record like Angels and Demons and Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, the fourth Indiana Jones film that doesn't exist, in my opinion, even though they brought back Miriam, and there were some things I liked about it, but everything else was over the top and green screen and shitty. But so yeah, Koepp is kind of hit and miss in the extent of that, you know, very comprehensive IMDb, but in this, I really feel like he does a terrific job, especially in the directorial department, from a visual standpoint, and the fact that, in a lot of ways, this is a story, when it boils down to it, of a man not just neglecting and kind of having an aspect of infidelity with his craft, you know, but it's with a relationship, and the fact that he in some ways was the cause for, you know, the fact that his wife is no longer with him, for the fact that you see at the very beginning of the film he has writer's block and he's got like a paragraph going and he just cannot seem to get the gears going, and then it's like, oh, you're somebody who can't get the gears going, and then in turn you're being accused of plagiarism and just all of these different things. It's like the stuff that you would need to be putting the proper attention towards. Did you really do it? Did you accomplish these things when you're in your right frame of mind? Have you, based on your poor choices, just wrecked a lot of the positive things in your life, whether it's relationship, whether it's you know, career possibilities as far as that continuing to propel forward and whatever. And these are all with the ups and downs of my personal career, from, you know, print journalism to, you know, broken engagements to musicianship, to all of these different things. And this is me being on the very real with you guys, something that I don't always completely get into. I first discovered this story when I was going through a very rough, just disillusion of an engagement based on some infidelity, but that didn't necessarily mean that everything was copacetic on both ends throughout the entirety of the time. You know, you can't play Peter Pan forever, and, you know, temptation, even if you don't act upon it, can still present itself and still cause problems. And so, yeah, I was, you know, when I first discovered this story, man, it was like, it was rough. It was very rough, because in a lot of ways it was a reflection of certain things that I was experiencing like well over a decade ago. But it was just like, damn, you know, you push things in a certain way and then they come back at you tenfold. So it's a story that, since King hasn't really written a lot of stuff about, you know, just cheating partners and things like that, and you find out the truth about the fact that, oh, you know, these things happened, you know, long afterwards and whatever, after somebody had already checked out, after whatever. And that's really a big theme that you find out later on in this. You know, Mort is so resentful and angry, and yet he was the one who was already just so much in his own world and focused upon his own stuff and detached and just not putting proper amounts of effort into one thing when he should have been in another. And damn, at the end of the day, as you find out, it's like he's barely able to put proper efforts into anything. And so this is a very fascinating and very very rough story for people who have experienced the life of a creative and the juggling act that it entails, and the fact that, you know, inspiration striking can happen at any time, and just the essence of importance that it really boils down to when you have a significant other who seems to understand but yet doesn't always. And it's tough, man. It's really tough, and you find out in both the story and the film that that is a very, very big crux of some of the issues that many characters and some of the developments that we find out about, whether it's Mort and his depression, and kind of, without really spoiling too much, because I'm sure you see it in the trailers, he's losing a little bit of a grasp on reality, and some of the fantasy aspects that we see in his dreams, and him just waking up and thinking he's like on a cliff about to fall into water, and some of these other insane things that, you know, are done very, very interestingly visually by Co-op and his team. It's just, I think this is such an underrated film, and I feel like the source material had a great deal to say, and that this had a great deal to say as well. And this is where I have to, at least as I'm trying to, it's so tough not to spoil things here, and I've praised the cast, I've praised the interestingness of the storytelling and the effects and everything like that, and the inspiration and the basis and whatnot, but this is where you really have to say that I can see why certain changes were made in the ending, for the sheer fact that this story actually has a lot of similarities, not just to King's own life, because King had a few crazy fans who accused him of, they're like, hey man, you stole my ideas. There was one woman in particular who accused him of plagiarism for multiple things. Every single account was dismissed. There was another person who broke into their vacation home up north in New England, and when Tobby caught him and, you know, had the cops called and everything, he was saying that King stole his idea for Misery and all this other stuff, and yet none of these claims have ever been even, like, settled out of court. They've all been completely dismissed. But, man, when you become that big and you're writing about this sort of stuff, this was definitely, in a lot of ways, one of King's most personal books since The Dark Half, and that is where, in the source material, and this I distinctively remember, there were some big Dark Half connections about manifestation of writing becoming real without really giving too much away, and I can see why some of those changes were made, for the sheer fact that this was a film, and the George Romero film with Hutton, who I was talking about earlier, Timothy Hutton, I think it's a very solid adaptation. One of the stronger Stephen King adaptations. It's not one of the best, but definitely one of the stronger ones. And so for that sheer fact, I can see why the ending change, where it alludes to way more connective tissue between that story, being The Dark Half, and Secret Window, Secret Garden, being this one. I can see why certain things were changed, omitted, altered, whatever, without telling all of you what those really are. So, yeah, and the whole Secret Window, Secret Garden thing, there's a scene in there where they're pushing some stuff away when they first get to this property, and the garden part, it's funny, the garden part has much more so of a meaning for one plot aspect, and then the window part, as far as just peering into alternate selves, different possibilities for your own future, things like that. That's more so what the title is referring to, and there's some Faulkner in there, and it's interesting. But if you have not read this, I honestly, it's tough. I can't really say which I would recommend doing more so, guys. Reading in 4 Past Midnight, The Secret Window, and I think, Secret Window, Secret Garden, I should say, and I think it is available as a standalone novella, if that is the route that you would personally prefer to take. I don't know which I would prefer route-wise to go. It's tough, man. It really, really is. I like them both, and I like them both for the fact that they can exist on different levels of the tower, but this is, along with Dolores Claiborne, 1408, and a few others that, for me, are some of the most underrated, unsung, and poorly appreciated solid Stephen King adaptations. So, I have been Jaime and Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors like Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and on YouTube, if you just search in Fuegotainment, you can find my personal YouTube channel where I cover everything that's not of the scarific variety, comedies, dramas, all that jazz. I just got done doing Boy, what did I do this weekend? I did Fighting with my family. I did a trailer reaction for Avengers Endgame. I've got more Star Wars coverage coming of every single release proper as we lead up to the episode 9 in December. I've also done all of the Best Picture nominations. I try to get at least a couple pieces of content out every week, and I'm looking forward to doing some more Fuego-tainment live, which will be like just news coverage, live, interactive with everybody. But if you haven't liked, shared, and subscribed here on The Horror Show for Hail to Stephen King, please do that. It is supremely appreciated. Yeah, we do trailer reactions, reviews, convention coverage, all kinds of rad status stuff. So please show us some love. We would greatly appreciate that. Also, if you want to have further palaver all about Sai King, jump onto Facebook and check out the Hail to Stephen King Ka-Tet and an upcoming video, which especially after rewatching this and seeing the changes that they made, I have to do a video counting down my favorite source material changes from book to adaptation for screen. So that's something I'm looking forward to, but I always look forward to seeing all of your awesome faces, even though I can't on this side of the coin. You're just looking at me, but hey, it's always a pleasure, and I'm so very happy to be sharing this with all of you. So until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more, I say hasta luego, sin amigos. Yes, cinema, amigos, sin amigos. That's where that branching thing goes down. And constant readers and viewers alike, I hope that we get to reconnect sooner rather than later. Say thank you. And until that instance transpires, remember to stay scared. And read Stephen King. I know I've been telling you to watch this the whole time, but yeah, the source material here is pretty goddamn good.